On the morning of March 12, 2026, delegates filed out of the Great Hall of the People in Beijing carrying red volumes. This is not a vision statement. It's a blueprint for breaking through a siege. Inside those volumes was a 141-page document, China's 15th five-year plan, formally adopted by the National People's Congress. The plan lists 109 major engineering projects spanning everything from rural development to food security to green energy. But 28 of those projects are different in kind from the rest. They're explicitly about winning every major technology race on Earth. Those 28 are what this video is about, because they're the ones that change the global balance of power. A 281-mile-per-hour bullet train put into commercial operation, homegrown aircraft engines and wide-bodied jets, advanced semiconductor manufacturing, high-density batteries and humanoid robots deployed in real-world industrial scenarios, controllable nuclear fusion, reusable heavy-lift rockets, lunar exploration missions, brain-computer interfaces available for commercial purchase, a general-purpose quantum computer, a deep-sea station that functions like an underwater space station built on the floor of the ocean. Every single one of those projects funded, staffed, and officially tasked to China's government agencies, state-owned enterprises, banks, and private companies, from the national level down to provincial governments, with a 5-year execution deadline. The plan sets a target of over 7% annual growth in research and development spending. For context, the entire U.S. federal R&D budget across every agency, every branch of the military, every national laboratory is roughly $200 billion per year. China's R&D spending in 2024 was already $378 billion and growing at double digits annually. This is the first 5-year plan since generative AI became the defining field of technological competition, and the first since the United States implemented its sweeping semiconductor export controls. China didn't write this plan as an aspiration, it wrote it as a response, and the 28 technology projects are the offensive arm of that response. In this video, we're going to walk through the projects that matter most, the ones that could actually reshape the world by 2030, the ones that are probably too ambitious to land on schedule, and the ones most American coverage has missed entirely. We'll explain why this plan is structurally different from every previous 5-year plan, and we'll ask the question that Washington hasn't answered. What does the United States have that is equivalent in scope and integration in the alignment of financial and industrial resources towards a common strategy? What it means when a country with a $20 trillion economy operates like a startup with a single 5-year roadmap and the full resources of the state behind every line item.
To understand what the 15th 5-year plan actually is, and why it matters more than any previous version, you first need to understand what a 5-year plan actually does in China's system. Because the mechanism is the point. The United States has an industrial policy. It just doesn't call it that. DARPA funds moonshot technologies. The Department of Energy funds clean energy. The CHIPS Act directed $52 billion towards semiconductor manufacturing. These are real interventions in markets by the federal government. But they're fragmented. They're contested politically. They're subject to changing administrations, shifting congressional priorities, and the constant pressure of quarterly earnings cycles from private companies that need to show returns to investors. Here's how to think about China's approach instead. The central government is the executive team. It sets the 5-year roadmap and the non-negotiable targets. Provincial governments are the regional business units. They adjust their budgets and land use policies to execute their portion of the plan. State-owned banks are the finance division. They redirect lending towards the plan's priorities without needing shareholder approval. State-owned enterprises restructure their R&D. Local governments create favorable tax and regulatory conditions. Private companies, knowing that government procurement and policy support will flow towards the plan's priorities, align their own investment accordingly. It's not a command economy in the Soviet sense. China's markets are real. Competition is real. Companies fail, but the direction is set from the top, with resources at every level aligned to execute it. Think of it less like a government policy and more like a company-wide OKR framework, except the company has a $20 trillion balance sheet and 1.4 billion employees. China set its 2026 annual growth target at 4.5 to 5%, the lowest official target since 1991, and the first time it has formally fallen below 5%. That reflects real economic pressures, a poverty sector still recovering from its 2021 crisis, high debt levels in local governments, and demographic headwinds from an aging population. China is not printing this plan from a position of unchallenged strength. It's printing it from a position of managed pressure, which is why the tone is different from anything that came before. The 14th five-year plan was drafted before Washington's sweeping 2022 to 2025 semiconductor export controls, and before generative AI became the defining competition. The 15th plan is explicitly different in design. It's much more focused on breaking bottlenecks, securing what the document calls strategic initiative, and reorganizing state support around technologies where China either needs to achieve independence or intends to achieve dominance. The plan even uses a phrase that has no direct equivalent in any American policy document: extraordinary measures. It appears in the official text to describe the approach to breakthroughs in core technologies, semiconductors, industrial machine tools, basic software, advanced materials, biomanufacturing. In Chinese policy language, extraordinary measures means that normal budget constraints, normal procurement rules, and normal decision-making timelines are suspended. The government will do whatever it takes. The previous five-year plans were designed primarily to grow China's economy and modernize its infrastructure. Economic growth was the North Star. The 15th plan framed technological dominance as a co-equal national security goal. Growth is still there, but for the first time, technological self-sufficiency and geopolitical resilience sit alongside economic expansion as explicit organizing principles. The plan also reveals something most Western coverage ignored. Beijing is explicitly preparing for extreme contingencies, including potential disruption to its coastal industrial base, by blockade, by military conflict, by escalating sanctions. The push to establish backup manufacturing capacity in interior regions to achieve food self-sufficiency and to build energy security redundancy reads less like economic planning and more like wartime industrial preparation. The 28 technology mega projects are the offensive component of that resilience strategy. Here's what they actually are. Of the 28 technology projects, some are straightforward engineering at enormous scale, some are genuinely unprecedented, and a few are listed with a 5-year deadline that most people outside the plan's authors probably don't believe. Start with the unglamorous category. The technologies China already has, but can't afford to depend on foreign suppliers for. The CR-450 bullet train is the flagship here. As covered in a previous World Shift video, the CR-450 hit 281 miles per hour in test runs in October 2025. The 15th plan commits to putting it into commercial operation, paying passengers traveling at 249 miles per hour on China's existing 31,000-mile high-speed rail network. No new track required. The fastest passenger train in history, deployed at scale on infrastructure that already exists. But the more strategically significant projects in this first grouping are the ones that don't make headlines: homegrown operating systems and industrial software. Industrial software, the code that controls manufacturing machinery, simulates product designs, manages supply chains, is currently dominated by American companies like PTC, Siemens, and Dassault. China's dependence on foreign industrial software is one of its deepest vulnerabilities. You can sanction a chip. Sanctioning the software that runs every Chinese factory is a different order of magnitude. The 15th plan is designed to close that gap. The C919 commercial aircraft rounds out this grouping, China's homegrown jet that the plan formally commits to mass production, offering airlines in the developing world a third option beyond Boeing and Airbus. The other projects here, large cruise ships, LNG carriers, homegrown aircraft engines, high-end machine tools, all follow the same logic. Eliminate the specific foreign dependencies that could be used to strangle Chinese industry in a sanctions scenario. Now move to the second grouping, where the scale becomes harder to process. Walk into the Agibot factory in Shanghai today, and you'll see humanoid robots assembling parts alongside human workers, not in a demo lab, on a production floor. China installed 295,000 industrial robots in 2024, representing 54% of the global total, with an operational stock already exceeding 2 million units. In the nascent humanoid segment, Chinese firms shipped roughly 90% of the world's units in 2025. The plan commits to deploying humanoid robots in real-world industrial scenarios at scale by 2030, backed by a 1 trillion yuan fund, $138 billion, for one industry vertical in 5 years. High-density batteries, including solid-state batteries, are listed alongside that robotics push. The current lithium-ion battery is approaching its physical limits in energy density. Solid-state batteries replace the liquid electrolyte with a solid material, increasing energy density, eliminating fire risk, and extending longevity. Whoever manufactures solid-state batteries at commercial scale first will dominate the next generation of EVs, smartphones, and grid storage. China's target is 2030. The plan also formally lists brain-computer interfaces as a priority industry for the first time. BCI technology that creates direct connections between the human brain and external devices. The plan targets commercial BCI products by 2030. The military implications of a brain-computer interface reliable enough for consumer deployment don't need to be spelled out in a policy document. Other projects in this grouping: long-range VTOL aircraft for the commercial drone economy, intelligent surgical robots, gene therapies, and biomanufacturing at scale. The third grouping is where the plan ventures into territory that genuinely divides serious analysts. The East Fusion Reactor sits in Hefei, Anhui Province, a city most Americans have never heard of that may be the most important laboratory on Earth. It set a world record of 1,066 seconds of sustained plasma in January 2025. The SE Fusion Energy Company launched with $2.1 billion in registered capital. The 15th plan formally commits state resources to a functional fusion demonstration reactor, the CFETR, with construction beginning around 2030. If it works, it changes energy geopolitics permanently. The quantum technology listing comes with $17.5 billion in dedicated state funding, allocated across 3 regional clusters: Beijing, Tianjin, Hubei for computing and sensing, the Yangtze River Delta for communications and industrial applications, and the Greater Bay Area for commercial products. The US, IBM, Google, and a dozen startups are racing to the same goal. China's difference is that the race is backed by state capital with a 5-year delivery mandate. High-performance domestic AI chips are listed explicitly, which, given that Nvidia has effectively exited the Chinese market and Huawei's Ascend is the primary alternative, represents China's formal commitment to semiconductor leadership in the single most strategically important chip category on Earth right now. Then there's what the plan calls brain-inspired artificial general intelligence systems. Worth being precise about what that means. This isn't the science fiction superintelligence the term AGI sometimes conjures. The plan refers specifically to advanced cognitive AI systems inspired by neuroscience, architectures that mimic how biological brains process information, rather than how current transformers do. It's ambitious engineering, not magic. Whether 5 years is remotely realistic is a different question.
The fourth grouping is infrastructure for the breakthroughs, the systems that produce the results in the other three categories, and the ones most coverage skips. Reusable heavy-lift rockets, the same economic logic that made Falcon 9 transformative. China's Long March 12A attempted its first stage recovery in December 2025 and missed its landing pad by approximately 1.2 miles. A second attempt is planned. The gap is real. The plan commits to closing it, pulling private rocket companies, Landscape, Galaxy Power, into the National Launch Manifest. Deep sea mining and a deep sea space station, a manned platform at depths no current facility can operate, designed to extract polymetallic nodules from the ocean floor. Those nodules contain manganese, cobalt, nickel, and copper, the critical minerals that every battery and every electric motor requires. An underwater mining operation removes dependence on land-based critical mineral supply chains entirely. Basic research reform, national laboratory expansion, and global science and technology leadership institutions round out the 28. Less dramatic than fusion reactors, more foundational than any of them. The R&D compound matters more than any single project. If China grows its R&D budget at 7% annually from its 2024 base of $378 billion, by 2030 it will be spending over $530 billion per year on research and development, against a U.S. federal R&D budget of approximately $200 billion.
28 projects sounds like ambition. To understand why it functions as a strategic threat to American economic and military competitiveness, you need to understand the track record of the plans that came before, because that track record is what makes the 15th plan something other than a wish list. China's 5-year plans have a mixed history. The semiconductor self-sufficiency target of 70% under Made in China 2025 was not met. China missed it by roughly 50 percentage points. The 15th plan quietly deleted that specific target and replaced it with a different metric: digital economy value added at 12.5% of GDP by 2030. That's not abandonment. That's a more sophisticated goal, no longer counting chips produced, but measuring how deeply computing infrastructure penetrates the entire economy. Harder to sanction, harder to measure from the outside, more meaningful in practice. But on the targets that did get met, the results were world historic. Clean energy sectors now make up 11.4% of China's GDP, nearly doubling since 2022. China installs more solar, wind, and battery capacity each year than the rest of the world combined. More electric vehicles are on the road in China than in the United States. China's Beidou satellite navigation system is on par with GPS in coverage and precision. China leads the U.S. in industrial robot density, 470 robots per 10,000 manufacturing employees in 2023 against 295 in the U.S. China's semiconductor production is now roughly 1/4 of global output. China is also about to match the United States in patents, its global share rising from 4% in 2000 to 26% in 2023, while the U.S. share dropped by more than 8 percentage points. The track record says when China puts something in a 5-year plan and backs it with state resources, it usually gets done. Not always on schedule, not always exactly as designed, but done. What stands out most about the 15th plan is that AI is no longer one priority sector among many. It's the organizing logic for the entire industrial transformation. The plan mentions AI more than 50 times. It includes an AI Plus action plan aimed at integrating AI across 6 economic domains: science and technology, industrial development, consumer services, public services, defense, and governance. That last word, governance, is worth sitting with. China is explicitly planning to use AI in government decision-making, regulatory enforcement, and social management. The civil liberties implications are one conversation. The operational efficiency implications are another. A government that can use AI to make regulatory decisions faster, identify infrastructure bottlenecks in real time, and coordinate industrial policy at the speed of software has structural advantages over governments that still run at the speed of human bureaucracies.
Which brings us to the question the plan itself implies. What does the United States have that is equivalent? America's industrial strategy looks less like a startup's roadmap and more like a Fortune 500 company run by committee, where the product roadmap changes every 4 years when the board changes. The CHIPS Act, $52 billion for semiconductors. The Inflation Reduction Act, hundreds of billions for clean energy spread over a decade. The National AI Initiative, a coordination framework with no dedicated funding at remotely comparable scale. These are real. The TSMC fab in Arizona is real. The Intel investments are real. The clean energy build-out is real. But there is no American equivalent of a 141-page document formally adopted by the legislature that tells every bank, every state government, every major company, every research university, and every local official exactly where to point resources for the next 5 years with binding targets, dedicated funding, and political accountability for delivery. America's industrial strategy changes every 4 years. It's contested by the party not in power. It competes in budget negotiations where semiconductor funding sits alongside highway spending and defense procurement. Private companies, whose own investment decisions shape the American industrial landscape as much as any government policy, are accountable to shareholders who measured performance in quarters. That's not an argument for authoritarianism. Democratic systems have real advantages in flexibility, creativity, and error correction that central planning cannot replicate. But in a race where the competitor has a single integrated roadmap, aligned resources at every level, and a 30-year track record of executing exactly this kind of coordinated industrial build-out, the absence of an equivalent American strategy is a choice, and choices have consequences. Not every one of the 28 projects will succeed. The AGI target is almost certainly too ambitious for 5 years, even with the narrower engineering definition the plan uses. The quantum computer target may be as well. Some fusion milestones will slip. Reusable rockets are harder than the plan suggests. The Long March 12A's missed landing is a reminder that the physics of propulsion doesn't respond to political will the way a manufacturing line does. China's own government acknowledges this. 5-year plans are frameworks, not guarantees. The system is better at executing known engineering challenges at scale, building rail, deploying solar, manufacturing batteries, than at producing genuine scientific breakthroughs on a calendar schedule. But the 28 projects don't all have to succeed for the plan to change the world. If 10 of them deliver, if the CR-450 runs commercially at 249 miles per hour, if humanoid robots are deployed in Chinese factories at scale, if China's AI chips achieve competitive performance, if solid-state batteries reach production, the global competitive landscape of 2030 looks radically different from 2026. China only needs to win the races that matter most, and it wrote down exactly which races those are.
On March 12, 2026, delegates in Beijing adopted a 141-page document that the United States has no equivalent of, a single integrated national roadmap backed by the full financial and institutional power of the world's second-largest economy, telling every actor in that economy exactly where to point resources for the next 5 years. Not all of the 28 will arrive on schedule. Some won't arrive at all. China's 5-year plans have a track record of hitting the targets that matter and missing the ones that were always aspirational. But here's what's already happening while the debate plays out. A train running at 249 miles per hour on tracks that already exist, not theoretical, just upgraded. Humanoid robots on factory floors in Shanghai, not in demo videos. A domestic AI chip that doesn't need Nvidia's permission to power Chinese AI infrastructure. And in Hefei, a reactor that has already held plasma for 1,066 seconds and has a government deadline to go further. The race isn't over. America's private sector, its research universities, its defense innovation ecosystem, and its alliance network represent genuine advantages that no 5-year plan can manufacture. The history of technological competition is full of cases where the better coordinated plan lost to the more creative, more adaptive competitor.
But a country that writes down exactly what it wants to build, funds it at every level of its economy, and has spent 30 years executing exactly this kind of coordinated industrial build-out is a country that tends to build the things it writes down. The 28 projects are written down, the money is allocated, the deadline is 2030. Subscribe to World Shift and turn on notifications. Every day we bring you the stories underneath the headlines, the plans, the technologies, and the power shifts that are quietly building the world the next generation will inherit. Understanding what's coming starts today. We'll see you in the next one.